Hello everyone, welcome back once again to C4TV. I am of course your host, Cynical Pete. Today we're taking a journey to a galaxy far, far away to discuss one of the main franchises that made me to the nerd I am today, Star Wars. Specifically, Star Wars Legends. Long before the sequels, the Disney buyout, or even the prequels, there was a menagerie of novels, novellas, comics, and even a few video games that were technically considered to be part of the Star Wars canon, known collectively as the Star Wars Expanded Universe, or Legends as it is known today. Now, obviously I'm not going to sum up 30 plus years of continuity in this little video. While I may go over certain events in more detail in their own videos, if there's any call for it, today I will only be focusing on the history of the Jedi and Sith orders, considering at least 80% of everything that happens in Legends is because of these two organizations. Also, this is going to be a two-parter. Maybe even a three-parter. As I was scripting this, I realized there was way too much to summarize in 20 minutes or less. So without any further ado, let's get going. A long time ago, and I mean a really long time ago, like 100,000 years or more before the original trilogy, there were the Celestials. They were a race of beings that evolved on the same planet as the midichlorians, and thus were the first species in the galaxy to learn how to use the Force. They were also the first species to invent hyperdrives, so they spread across the galaxy, meeting up with other races and teaching them about both technology and the Force. Everything was going well until a group of upstart little shits called the Rakata collectively decided to make everything worse for everyone, everywhere, for the next several millennia. Why the Rakata decided to do this is never elaborated on. Some Rakata maintained for eons that the Celestials were slave drivers, but considering the Rakata didn't exactly treat the other races they came across that well, that and the fact that they named their domain the Infinite Empire, I'm going to err on the side of the Rakata just being dicks. Regardless, the Celestials disappeared. Whether or not they were completely wiped out isn't clear, but they were effectively gone from the setting. However, a fleet of pyramid-shaped vessels with an odd symbol on them began appearing, landing on various planets around the galaxy, and the Force sensitives on these planets became mysteriously drawn to these structures. Among those who boarded them were the Wookiee shamans of Kashyyyk, the Bendu monks of Thape, the witches of Danthamir, and the Kisasi caste of the Sith. These and many others were brought to the planet Tython, a planet near the core of the galaxy which had several nexuses of both light and dark side energy. They called themselves the Jedi, and studied both sides of the Force in equal measure. The Jedi eventually ordered all non-Force sensitive individuals to be banished from Tython and colonize the worlds of the surrounding systems, both for their own protection. The various nexuses of energy on the planet caused all kinds of weather and geological hazards, and to allow other members of the Order to focus more on studying the Force. Sounds dumb to me, but nothing bad happened as a result, so what do I know? Across the galaxy, on the planet Korriban, the Sith species were undergoing a significant conflict. A powerful warrior named Adas had declared himself king of the Sith and was in the process of conclusively backing it up. He'd eventually conquer the entire world and reign undisputed for 300 years. Then, who should show up but the Rakata? The Infinite Empire had expanded so far out that emissaries had arrived on Korriban and attempted to lure Adas and his kingdom into a false sense of security by offering them some of the Empire's advanced technology, notably holocrons, but it didn't take Adas long to realize what they really wanted, and it took the Rakata entirely too long to realize that the majority of the Sith were Force sensitive. Despite their huge technological advantage, Adas was able to chip away at their forces and eventually drive them off, though it was at the expense of his life. This would have been, and indeed should have been, a relatively minor defeat if the Rakata weren't already in the process of kicking their own ass. Yep, like many empires in the real world, the Infinite Empire had become too large to be ruled over by a central government and fractured into territories ruled over by various warlords. One race, though we never learn who, took advantage of this and developed a virus that mutated the Rakata's genes so severely that they became separated from the Force. As the virus was spreading across their species, a group of Rakata attempted to conquer Tython in order to find an object known as an Infinity Gate. For Warhammer 40k fans, this was basically a webway portal. For you Stargate fans, it's a Stargate. For everyone else, it's a hyperdrive you don't need to plug into a ship in order to use. You see, the reason why the Rakata being cut off from the Force was such a huge deal is that, like the Sith, most of the Rakata were Force sensitive, so they developed almost all of their technology to be powered by the Force. Yeah, apparently the phrase "don't put all your eggs into one basket" didn't exist in the Rakata's vernacular. Point is, they were rapidly running out of both hyperspace-capable ships and people who could operate them, and wanted to reverse engineer the Infinity Gate to try to salvage what was left of their empire. But like on Korriban, the Rakata found themselves fighting a united planet full of Force sensitives who could use their technology. So once again, they found themselves getting kicked out of the star system by a technologically inferior foe, in addition to all the other races who were also kicking them out of their respective systems. Eventually, the Rakata were beaten all the way back to their home planet of Lehan, which at this point was the only planet they controlled. They threw up an EMP field around the planet's upper atmosphere to crash any ships that came looking for a little payback. Pretty soon, all the oppressed races stopped bothering, and the Rakata faded into myth. Back with the Jedi, things were about to hit the fan. For context, the Jedi studied the light and dark sides of the Force in equal measure. There were 2 moons around Tython: Ashla, which was strong on the light side, and Bogon, which was strong on the dark side. And if a Jedi was drifting too far in one direction, they'd be sent to the appropriate moon to get them balanced out. But the fight with the Rakata changed things. Many Jedi, after witnessing such a large invading force comprised mostly of dark side users, decided that maybe they should focus on the light exclusively to avoid turning into oppressors themselves. While the other side... Look, you don't really need me to tell you where this is going, do you? There was a 10-year conflict called the Force Wars, and at the end of it, the Bogon-aligned Jedi were chased off the planet and scattered across the galaxy. The remaining Jedi renamed themselves the Jedi because of reasons, and fled the planet as well due to the conflict causing the 2 moons' orbits to destabilize. Then a bunch of gravitational anomalies popped up around the area, cutting Tython off for the rest of the galaxy for the next several millennia. The Jedi eventually landed on a planet called Ossus, and after a few centuries would swear allegiance to a newly formed government called the Galactic Republic, and things would be good for a while. Then, 5 centuries later, a young Jedi named Zendor began pondering things about the Order. He believed that the Jedi were becoming too close-minded in their approach to the Force, and that they shouldn't exclusively train in the light. After many years, Zendor and some of his followers left to form their own academy on the planet Latau. They called themselves the Legions of Latau, and surprisingly, had no plans to attack the Jedi or the Republic. He just wanted to study the Force without restraint. He did, however, wind up striking the first blow. The Jedi had begun training students and amassing ships specifically to fight the Legions, though they didn't plan on being the aggressors. But when Zendor found out about this, he decided not to take chances and launched an attack on Ossus in an attempt to end the war quickly. It is worth noting that, for his part, Zendor thought the Jedi had too much influence on the Republic and were amassing power for their own gain. His goal from the start was to end the conflict by taking out the Council so the war wouldn't spill over into the Republic proper. He even sent emissaries to the Republic to warn them of the Jedi's true intentions, but they didn't buy it and joined the battle on the Jedi's side. This war, called the First Great Schism, ended when Zendor was slain on the planet Columus by Jedi Master Aldrista Pina. Arden Lyn, Zendor's lover and second-in-command, faced off against Pina herself and was defeated and disarmed. She used a powerful force attack to mortally wound Pina, who in turn sent her into a kind of stasis. A powerful artifact Lyn had in her possession called the Kashimur Talisman preserved her for several millennia, but we'll get back to that. For over 17,500 years, things were more or less stable with both the Jedi and the Republic. But then things would really pick up around 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. Oh yeah, ABY and BBY are the standard units of measurements in old Star Wars lore. I may or may not use those to save time later, I haven't decided yet. Anyway, a group of Jedi, Ajunta Paul, Karnus Moore, and Zozan conducted several experiments with the Force and found ways to manipulate life on the genetic level. They could extend their own lives, make themselves stronger, or even create new life forms. The Council was understandably not okay with any of this and told the three of them to cut that shit out or else. They opted for or else, and the Second Great Schism, also called the 100 Years' Darkness, had begun. The trio gathered a group of followers and taught them their secrets. They took control of several worlds and raised up armies of all manner of abominations. Problem is, though many of these creatures were resistant to the Force, they weren't very smart, and the Dark Jedi were way outnumbered by their counterparts. Paul, Moore, and Zozan were able to keep themselves alive for 100 years while they led their forces against the Jedi, whom they viewed as simply being jealous of their superior control of the Force. Yeah guys, that was it. It didn't have anything to do with the fact that you three were responsible for the Rakghoul virus. Idiots. Anyway, after a century of war, the Dark Jedi forces were beaten back and their leaders were captured. The Republic demanded public executions, but because they were technically Jedi, the final decision rested with the Council. So the traitors were exiled to the unknown regions, completely unsupervised, and the Council just hoped they would all see the error of their ways eventually. Geez guys, I know you don't execute your prisoners, but I would have put them all in separate prisons or something. So the exiled forces made a blind hyperspace jump, letting the Force guide them to wherever it would, and it led them straight to Korriban. It had been a long time since Adas was running the show, and his death sparked some serious infighting. Eventually, the planet was so devastated that most of the remaining population used some of the spaceships they lifted from the Rakata and split into two groups. One landed on Ziost and continued to run their society mostly the same as always. The others were banished to Tund for the crime of thinking the Rakata might have had some interesting ideas that clashed with the old Sith religion. The Sith from Ziost built more ships and started spreading to other planets, while the guys from Tund would stay isolated for quite some time. We'll get back to them next time. Korriban itself would basically become a tomb world for the burgeoning Empire's leaders, populated mostly by religious fanatics. When the Dark Jedi landed, the primitive Sith came at them with Force-forged swords and illusions. Paul and his allies were duly impressed, but easily overpowered them, raided several tombs, and took any holocrons and texts they thought might be useful. Soon, the whole planet were worshipping them as gods, and they spread out and took over the rest of the Sith colonies. The Dark Jedi were rechristened the Sith Lords, and Ajunta Paul was the first Dark Lord of the Sith. The Sith Empire continued to grow away from the Republic's eyes for the next 2 millennia. Then, along came a guy named Marka Ragnos. He ruled for over 200 years and doubled the size of the Empire during his time. And on his council were 2 powerful Sith Lords, Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh, who hated each other immensely. That in and of itself is nothing new for Sith Lords, but this particular rivalry would have some long-lasting consequences for the rest of the galaxy. Sadow constantly advocated for heading back to Republic space and finishing what their ancestors started, while Kresh wanted to keep expanding in the section of space they were in, so when the Republic eventually stumbled onto them, the war would be on their terms. After Ragnos finally died, Naga Sadow boldly declared himself to be the next Dark Lord of the Sith at the guy's funeral, no less. I mean, wow. The balls that takes is just wow. Kresh very intensely disagreed with this and attempted to make his displeasure known by means of a Force sword to the face. The two engaged in a fierce duel, but then Ragnos' spirit showed up specifically to tell the two of them to shut up so he could get some sleep. Conveniently for Sadow, his dreams of warring with something other than his own species was about to come true. A Republic scouting vessel experiencing a hyperdrive malfunction landed on Ziost. The pilots were recovered by the Sith, who didn't believe the pilot's story that they had shown up here by complete accident. Sadao then had some of his guards kill the prison guards with blasters and free the pilots, making it look like there were more Republic agents on the planet and some shit was about to go down. But Kresh quickly figured out what really happened, mainly because when the Republic infiltrators attacked one of Kresh's starports, Kresh found a bunch of dead Sith warriors with Sadao's insignia on their uniforms. Unfortunately for Kresh, this was a trap set by Sadao, who knew that Kresh would jump at any excuse to declare an attack, so when Kresh showed up with a small fleet over Sadao's stronghold to bomb him into oblivion, Sadao called down a big fleet he had waiting in low orbit. In the ensuing battle, Kresh got stomped so hard he had to let his ship get shot down so he could escape by faking his death. Hardly any of Sadao's followers knew what was really going on. To them, it was just another Sith Lord attempting to kill a rival. I mean, it's the Sith. This kind of thing happens all the time. Anyway, Sadao used a tracer he placed on the Republic ship to follow it back and launched a massive assault on the unsuspecting Republic. And thus began the Great Hyperspace War. One of the biggest reasons Kresh was against a war was because the Sith did not have the numbers for a full-scale invasion. To remedy this, Sadao used a Sith meditation sphere to amplify his power and took refuge next to the star of the Primus Golud system. Using this sphere, he was able to project powerful illusions to make his army seem more numerous and more powerful than they really were. Republic troops would spend hours firing at lines of Sith warriors, not realizing they were shooting at the trees and the real warriors were enjoying a relaxing tea break 20 feet behind them. Now you might be thinking, Pete, that sounds like a plan that, while formidable, could easily be undone if someone just shot Naga Sadao's meditation sphere. And you'd be 100% correct. Remember those two Republic pilots Sadao had freed to set up this whole thing? Those two were named Jory and Gav Daragon, a brother-sister duo who ran a small shipping company that was drowning in debt. Gav was also Force-sensitive, though not powerful enough to be a Jedi. He was powerful enough for Sadao to train, though, so he let Jory escape while he kept Gav behind. The Dark Lord taught Gav Sith sorcery techniques to amplify his power and promised to make him and his sister rich beyond their wildest dreams. Desperate to escape near bankruptcy, he accepted Sadao's offer to train him and led the vanguard fleet of the invasion. But then he attacked his home planet. Once he made planetfall and saw what he had done, he made a beeline for the Primus Golud system and shot his boss's sphere down. Sadao escaped and returned to Ziost, where Kresh had a fleet waiting for him. But at this point, Sadao was done with everyone's bullshit and just rammed into his rival's flagship. He took a shuttle down off his own ship before it went down and headed to Yavin 4, a place you should all be familiar with. He had the minions he brought down with him erect a huge pyramid for him, because it should be obvious by now that the Sith are about as subtle as a brick to the head, and sealed himself inside a Beskar coffin until the galaxy was complacent and ready for conquering again. Whew, and that's where I'm going to leave you all for now. Just explaining the Great Hyperspace War took up more time than I had intended. The next video won't be part 2, unfortunately. I have a few other things I want to cover first, but I'll be back here before too long. Until then, I am Cynical Pete. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all next time right here on C4TV.